So,
everything is vain.
yeah, so, I'm not gonna totally be able to answer your question, except there's a 12 paragraph piece here on the word hevel, meaning senselessness or absurdity, and they offer 5 different translations which they use in different places. Vanity, futile, ephemeral, meaning troubled by life's brevity, incomprehensible, right? A matter which is hidden from humans that they are unable to perceive clearly and do not understand, and also absurd or senseless. And so what the new translation is doing is, rather than always using, right, there's a problem with translation anyway. On one hand, you can always translate it as futile, so you get the same word. If it's hevel here, it's hevel there, but the word means something different in different places, and so they're trying to line it up with the way that it's there. What was the line? Reading a text in translation is like kissing a bride through the veil. There's a little bit that's missing. All right, Frank, I cut you off so quickly. We'll go a little bit further.
Okay. What real value is there for a man in all the gains he makes beneath the sun?
So that's the verse that the Talmud quoted, right? To which they say, well, right, beneath the sun. Okay.
One generation goes, another comes, but the earth remains the same forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and glides back to where it rises. Southward blowing, turning northward, ever turning blows the wind. On its rounds, the wind returns. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place from which they flow, the streams flow back again.
Okay. So the imagery, anybody want to comment on this at all? I mean,
It's
the
like
yeah.
a circular thing.
It's very much a cycle, to which, there's 2 different ways to view the cycle. Right? We just had it now with the high holidays, right? Why am I sitting here? I just did this last year. I'm going to say the same words next year. How am I? We've had that discussion. So one way is kind of the negative view that it's all a waste of time. It's all going to happen, and nothing. The world's not going to change much when I'm in or out. The other view is there's always second chances. But I think in this imagery, he is really giving you his answer as well. This imagery is very much about moderation. Who are the people who suffer? Right? If you lean too much to the left, you're going to fall. If you lean too much to the right, you're going to fall. The answer is to be somewhere in the middle. Right? If you are overly joyous, right, and you party all the time, bad things can happen. You live a life that's meaningless. If you're overly depressed and you can't get out of bed in the morning, then you live a life that's meaningless. And so the answer, right, is somewhere. Don't be too happy. When you're too happy, sort of notice, oh, I'm too happy. Let's temper it down a little bit. When you're upset, notice, well, tomorrow's going to be different than today. So, right, it's written as a negative. The seas do rise, we now know, right? But the sea never rises, the water goes in, the water goes out, all the rivers flow in, it's not making a difference. It doesn't matter how many books this generation writes, and in 30 years they're going to say all that stuff is old, and they're going to write new stuff, right? But you have, again, this kind of feeling, let me stay in the middle. Diane?
I don't see that. I see him contrasting human beings with nature.
How so?
Well, we come and go, but the earth remains the same forever. The sun is always rising every day. The wind is always blowing. The streams are always flowing. So I don't know what he's trying to say about it, but I think he's trying to contrast human beings with the timelessness of nature and the very limited time of
So that is definitely another piece of a general piece of the book anyway. So what you're saying has to have some validity, that no matter how wealthy and he's going to say that later, no matter how wealthy I am, I'm going to work all my life and get all this wealth, and my son will get the money,
That is a result of the translation. because the second line of verse 4 is but in English, but the earth. In Hebrew, it's v'ha'aretz, and in Hebrew, which if you read it in the Hebrew, doesn't say contrasting human life with natural cycles. It's this both human life and natural cycles.
So in
are alive.
fairness, the "va" in the Bible can mean and or but. So this is not a which translation is correct. You're saying both pieces. One way it says, don't get so worried, right? It could say this also, right? The sun will come up tomorrow. Another part of the moderation piece is that when things are down, one of the sort of answers that he gives is, well, there's going to be another day.
I think the last line here is where it's all about, there's nothing new under the sun. He hadn't read that far yet, but.
Huh? Well, no, he did, we did say it the first line too, what real value is there, that's there, right? Well,
No, it's not that there's not value, it's that there's nothing new.
right, so the things that you think are new are, somebody else did it before, it's not really valuable.
And somebody's gonna do it in the future.
Somebody else is gonna do it in the future. So there is this, this piece of, we can't make the world, right? Tikkun olam, tikkun olam, tikkun olam. Kohelet would say back, who are you kidding? You're not going to make it better. You're not going to solve poverty. It's always going to be there, right? We don't have as much of an impact. The other side of that coin is you can't screw it up, because who are you to screw up the world, right? It's going to be there regardless of what you do.
But in this part that we've just read, that stuff is not there. They're taking it a bit farther. All they're
You
saying
think?
is, everything is repetitive. It's gonna go on and on and on, and whether we do something or not, it's gonna happen. There's nothing new. I don't know
Right, so,
where you're
so
getting this other
phrasing
part.
that as a problem, the problem is, so I'm a wise person. I think that I'm contributing to the stage of wisdom. I think that in 80 years, someone's gonna talk about how smart I was. When the reality is that in 80 years, nobody's gonna remember who I was. They're gonna go on and they're gonna do their new thing. So the problem is, all of the things that I do seem to be meaningless.
The only thing I don't see is the moderation.
All right, so what I will say is that his answer in other places, which we will see very, very clearly, is going to be moderation. And my feeling is that it's not an accident that the imagery that he's using to define the problem is also part of the solution. So in that sense, I'm saying it's a little very. Yeah. Let's keep reading. Go ahead, we're up to verse 8.
Right, okay. All such things are wearisome. No man can ever state them. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear enough of hearing. Only that shall happen which has happened. Only that occur which has occurred. There is nothing new beneath the sun.
Let's go on one more little piece there.
Sometimes there is a phenomenon of which they say, look, this one is new. It occurred long since, in ages that went before us. The earlier ones are not remembered. Those too close that will occur later will no more be remembered than those that will occur at the very end.
All right, so, right, well, what's the message? Huh?
What's the point?
I mean, there is a piece of what's the point. Don't think that you're going to invent some, I don't know if somebody can think of an example of something.
Well, we could use the.
You thought it was new, but it's really just the same thing that came before.
We could use the expression that you hear nowadays, everything old is new again.
Yeah, well, certainly like with style.
Well, with, I think, a lot of things, not just
I think about this a lot, you know, we do Yisker and we talk about, you know, do you believe in life after death? And you say, oh, well, you're gonna live on in memory. You know, that works for your children, maybe your grandchildren, maybe if you're lucky, your great-grandchildren. But that's it. You don't live on in memory.
What I get out of it is that we're just not as important as we have come to believe ourselves to be.
Right, and so, are you depressed by that realization, or is that, I mean,
No.
that's like real life?
Right, that's the real thing. And if we go beyond that and think that we are just so important, we're not.
So I guess that going back to my other point about the moderation, right, on the one hand, the problem is all the things that we think of as important were really not as important as we thought, but the corollary to that is, you know, I had the worst day of, that's my daughter's thing every day. This is the worst day ever, right? But the corollary is, if you have this attitude, well, it probably wasn't really that much worse than 2 weeks ago, and tomorrow it won't seem that bad, and don't, you know, you can revel in this idea of the things that I think are so important really aren't. Don't sweat it.
I have some counterexamples.
Sure.
Edison and the electric light bulb, Bell and the telephone. They remembered after they grandkids.
That's right. That's right. So there are that select few. If you could find a diary in which Edison expressed that he was really depressed, then you'll have Kohelet right there.
That's a good example. If you ask kids today about an electric light bulb, they don't know about it. They know about LEDs. You see?
That's a good point, yeah.
Life moves on, and things that you think are important at the time seem to be less important looking back. I know that things that I thought were important to me at the time, things I did in college, when I tell them to my grandchildren, they just yawn. You see, they're in college now, and they say, "Oh, Grandpa, come on." And so what he's saying is right. Things that you think are important, at the instant you're doing them, diminish important with time, and especially with the next generation.
Well, I think we have to be a little careful because what we're not keeping in mind is that concepts of progress and discovery are actually very new. They really didn't exist until about the time of Columbus and the like, and words like discovery, in the sense that we mean them, weren't in many languages. So the whole idea of progress is a fairly modern notion, and I think in biblical periods, and even for maybe a millennium after that, you had this idea of everything is repeated. The ancients really do things, and we're only recovering things that they had originally known. So we don't want to put our modern sensibilities
But I think
into the understanding
discovery
here.
before Columbus was in terms of discovering new lands. Exploration was the mode. And the technology like the printing press and things like that came afterwards. But I think people are always trying to discover in their own way, new territory, stuff like that.
Well, the point is here that he's commenting about the basic levels. People basically haven't changed. Their toys may have, if I can use that particular word, their toys may have, but their other levels haven't changed. The Earth on its basic level until we get enough global warming hasn't changed.
But when you think of it at an elemental level, we have the comfort of continuity. People needed to see, and first the light was just what the sun gave you, and then there was fire, and then this and that and that. So we have a different vehicle, but we really have the same thing we always needed before, accomplishing the same thing it accomplished before.
Right. Well, and I mean, so in fairness, first of all, in fairness to Ted, right now he's only stating the problem, right? He's not giving the solution. We're going to read on a little bit further. We're going to see, I mean, the things that we think that we want, the things that we think that are important, are not our basic human need. Our basic human need is the most basics of comfort, but also it's a need for value as a person. It's a need for satisfaction, not a need for more stuff, not even a need for more wisdom. But right now, he's just discovering that the things he thinks are important aren't so much so. Let's let somebody else read. We'll go to chapter 12. He's going to be a little bit more autobiographical. Sorry, verse 12. Marty, you want to read?
Okay.
Marty.
Oh, me, okay. Koheleth was king in Jerusalem over Israel. I set my mind to study and to probe with wisdom all that happens under the sun. An unhappy business that, which God gave men to be concerned with. I observed all the happenings beneath the sun, and I found all is futile and pursuit of wind. A twisted thing that cannot be made straight, a lack that cannot be made good.
All right. So we're introduced to another sort of phrase. We had hevel, meaning futile, and before it said vanity. And then this other phrase, re'ut ruach. Again, so if hevel means a breath that goes away, re'ut ruach is the passing wind. It's there and it's gone. So again, if you're putting it sort of in the Solomon mindset, from what you've seen, I've done it all. And let me tell you, I've seen, it's an unhappy business, this being wise. I've seen it all, and it pretty much stinks. Who wants to comment on a twisted thing that cannot be made straight?
You can't undo what you've done.
So if you've made a mistake, you can't undo it, right? That's one piece. I think there's also an element going back to this whole repairing the world. If poverty could be eliminated, we would have been eliminated already. The world is twisted in the sense that there are all these things that are wrong with it. That are, why do wicked people suffer? Well, that's one of the twisted things in the world, but you can't fix it. It's going to be that way. The most you're going to get out of him is you can learn to deal with it. But again, so does that mean that you're not going to fix the world that we shouldn't try? Well, that's the leftover question. You see, Stephen? Just got your hands in a nice place. One piece. So here, keep reading. Who wants to read? No, you can read. Go. Verse 16.
I said to myself, here I have grown richer and wiser than any that ruled before me over Jerusalem. And my mind has zealously absorbed wisdom and learning. And so I set my mind to appraise the and to appraise madness and folly. And I learned that this too was pursuit of me.
All right, so your first thought would be, well, stuff's no good, partying is a waste of time, accomplishments amount to nothing, so maybe I should study Torah all day, study philosophy. And this is one of the things where they were talking about the contradiction, because later they're going to say, well, the only thing you should do is acquire wisdom, right? But he finds that all of his learning, again, Rayon, Ruach, same as Ruach, pursuit of wind, it's a waste of time. Again, for the reader thinking, oh, this was Solomon, they've got to be going in their head, wait a minute, I watched you and you looked so happy. You seemed to enjoy it so much. You're almost like, it's like a tell-all. All the stuff that you thought you saw really wasn't true. That's the movie star waking up in the morning and telling you that they're suffering from depression.
Being a wise man, he had to realize it, even though he may think he hasn't seen it.
Well, so that's one piece. Maybe that's an explanation of verse 18, so you might as well read it.
For as wisdom grows, vexation grows. To increase learning is to increase heartache.
There is this element of ignorance is bliss, right? The more that you know, the more you recognize how the sausage is made, the more you recognize how much you don't know. And you become,
And especially a guy in his position, he's worried about all the intrigue that's going on around him.
right.
Yeah,
And sometimes you want to turn off the switch and say, I just wish I didn't know that.
Right.
That's what he probably did. He probably said, I've learned, up to this point, I've learned that it's futile. I don't want to learn anymore because there's no point. Even though there must have been more to learn.
But can you actually do that? can you actually say, I'm not doing it? It's good for the kid, yes. But like in real life, can a person say, I've had enough, I guess you could say, I don't like anything, I'm banging my head against the wall, stop banging my head against the wall.
With all the rabbis you talked about in the introduction, our sages valued learning for the sake of learning itself. And you're talking about to increase learning is to increase heartache, and what's the use of Bible study and Talmudic.
Right, and so to which they would then respond, well, there's other places where he says that wisdom is great, and so there's two kinds of wisdom. So if you're learning things like you want to memorize all the batting averages of the major league players, well, yeah, that is heartache and folly and a waste of time and all this. But if you're studying Torah and you're figuring out which lesions on the lungs are going to be kosher and not, well, that will bring you
The art scroll has an interesting comment there. It must be noted that Solomon is not advocating that ignorance is bliss. He's decrying the accumulation of much wisdom as the main source of human happiness. As the Kotzker Rebbe said, for with much wisdom comes much grief, but nevertheless it's still man's obligation to acquire wisdom. That's kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, it's both sides. I mean, that comment is basically like what's going through their head is, wait a minute, that's like Pete's comment. Wait a minute, I thought that we're supposed to study wisdom. So, well, certain things that you should be, certain things that you shouldn't. Here, to make sense of this, to make sense of this verse, Ibn Ezra, 11th century, explains that one who understands the world will suffer from knowing that his children will eventually die and his wisdom will be lost. You really understand that, right? And the day of his death is placed between his two eyes. This, however, is known to all. Another is that you're going to become, that you're going to, Mendelssohn has the view that why is wisdom bad? Because you're going to get to this point where you realize, there are certain walls that you can't cross, and certain things you're not allowed to know. State secrets, or whatever it is. So there's a point where you're going to become frustrated. All things that you do, and again, there's that piece of moderation. It starts well, but you hit a point where the thing that I enjoyed is now becoming pointless. I've seen it. It's not a joke. It's very true. You watch kids in youth sports.